Good morning, good morning. Happy Wednesday, happy Wellness Wednesday. I hope you are doing well today. I started Wellness Wednesday as an opportunity to share ideas and tips that each of us have experienced that have helped us with different aspects of wellness. Wellness is a very broad range. And so this is a great way to share things and discuss things, and hopefully a lot of times we hear the same things over and over and over again, but they don't actually take, so to speak, until we've heard them at just the right time. Good morning, Carla. So sometimes, even if it's something you've heard a million times over, sometimes you just need to hear it from a different person, see it in print when someone comments, etc., for it to stick. So if you don't know me, if you're just stumbling on my page, my name is Donna. I am a mom, a nana, a girlfriend, a wellness advocate. I am an entrepreneur, and I am currently studying to get my personal trainer certification and looking at grad school in about a year. So I'm happy to be here because wellness is a big deal for me. And again, it's such a broad range. There's so many different things that fall under the umbrella of wellness. Anything I talk about, if you have suggestions, comments, things you'd like to see me to cover in the future, I love to learn. So please feel free to send me a message. Let me know the kinds of things you're thinking about that you might, if you don't have time to dig into it, I would love to for you. And as always, no politics, no negativity, because neither of those usually have anything to do with wellness. Last week I talked about holiday depression and some things that cause it and some tips to get to help cope with it, not to get rid of it, because a lot of times that's associated with other more long-term forms of depression, and it's not always it's not something you can just blink away. So today I decided to do a part 2 because I did mention last week that anxiety and depression often go hand in hand. I know this from personal experience, from speaking with counselors myself. I have been in counseling a few times in my life for various reasons, and studied counseling quite a bit because it's something I think I'd like to do in the future. Now with that said, the information I'm giving you today are either my personal experiences or things that I have found on the internet. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a licensed mental health counselor. Here, I just want to share ideas with you and things that have worked for me, and things that may work for you, and vice versa. So the reason that I say that anxiety and depression often go hand in hand is because it is actually fairly rare to find one without the other. And my experience has been, I actually had a counselor tell me once, as I was starting to deal with my depression and found myself becoming somewhat angry and a little confrontational, which is, if you know me, is extremely out of the norm. I'm not typically a confrontational person ever. But as I found myself becoming more angry and more confrontational in odd situations, I spoke to my counselor at the time about it, and he said that what often happens is when you have a combination of depression and anxiety, and again, they very often go hand in hand, as one comes down or decreases, the other tends to come up and increase if you still haven't dealt with the underlying issues that are causing both. So that is one of the reasons why they often go hand in hand. So first, I thought it would be a good idea to start with the differences between the two. With anxiety, you're often worrying about the immediate or long-term future. You have uncontrollable racing thoughts. You purposely avoid situations that may cause that anxiety, that may cause those racing thoughts. Social anxiety is a great example of that, something that I experienced for quite a while before I even realized that's what was going on. And you have a tendency to think about death due to perceived danger. Now, if you've ever been a parent, that's anxiety that you may be able to speak to also. If as a parent you had crazy dreams about something happening to your child, losing your child, stuff like that, or even crazy daydreams in a situation that you perceive to be unsafe. That's often anxiety linked. In fact, some of those dreams we call anxiety dreams. I have them sometimes about these videos. I will hit the snooze button and start to fall back asleep and start dreaming about all kinds of things related to these videos. And some could perceive that as an anxiety dream about how I think this is going to go and what's going to work. So depression, on the other hand, it's often a different side of the same coin. In this case, instead of worrying about the immediate or long-term future, you're often feeling hopeless about the future, or you're stuck ruminating in things that have happened before, that you think in your mind that everything would be wonderful if you could just get back there again. You often believe things are not worth trying. So it's not necessarily a situation of avoidance. It's a not even why should I even bother type mentality. You often feel worthless, and if you are thinking about death, it's due to a persistent belief that there's just no point. So those are the key marker differences between anxiety and depression, but often it's the same things that get us in either place. So let's talk about triggers. Triggers general stress. And again, here we are in the holidays. There's a lot of additional stress outside of the norm. Lots of gathering, lots of perceived obligations. So a lot of what I'm going to say today is going to sound like what I talked about last week, because for all intents and purposes, it is. Depending on your personality and where you're at, you can go either direction with these triggers. Or you may become anxious, and then as that anxiety starts to settle down, it leads to a depression. So there are not a lot of differences, but there are some. General stress can cause anxiety. Health issues can cause anxiety. If you're having health issues and you're worried about how it's going to affect your ability to do things in the future, care for someone in the future, a child, and an elderly relative who is not able to care for themselves, or even yourself, if you're worried about, maybe you don't have as much in retirement as you thought you did, and you are concerned that you might not be able to continue working as long as you thought you would. Things like that. Of course, financial concerns, and all of this ties in again with the health, the financial, the general stress. During the holidays, we're often spending more than we plan to, have the budget for, want to. That leads to anxiety, especially if you're already thinking about what the credit card debt's going to look like after Christmas, things like that. Social anxiety is a real thing, and especially at the holidays, there's a lot of public events, there's a lot of private gatherings. We just did a mixer/dinner last night, which was amazing. And sometimes those gatherings bring with them conflict if you're around people that you have not set boundaries with, or if you're around family members that you don't necessarily get along with. Social anxiety is something that sometimes pops out in people that aren't necessarily known to have anxiety the rest of the time. And I didn't say that right, so let me say what I mean by that. You may find that people that you don't necessarily know to be anxious, that you don't necessarily know to have the symptoms of anxiety, may struggle a lot with social events. So one of the earmarkers for my social anxiety was a gathering. I had been divorced for quite some time. I hadn't dated in quite some time. Had an opportunity to go to a bonfire with a gentleman that I was interested in. And I did not realize how bad my social anxiety was until this day. I had often turned down plans because that friends would invite me to, because I just didn't feel like going, or I had too much to do. And that had happened quite frequently over the years, and I didn't recognize it for what it was. But my daughter was at a friend's house, and this bonfire was down the street from her house. And I was so worked up about going and meeting this person, this gentleman, and more gathering with the friends, the mutual friends that we had that were not people I knew outside of work, that I literally paced in circles in her in my daughter's friend's foyer entryway, dressed in like 3 layers for a cold evening, pacing in circles, trying to figure out how I could get out of this cul-de-sac without being seen. Because all of a sudden, I was having this massive anxiety about being around these people and being around this gentleman and what they were going to think of me and what I was going to say and how they were going to think I looked and all of it. If there was something that I could worry about this situation, that I was going to say something wrong, that I was going to say something right, you pick it. I was just spinning, literally, physically spinning in circles in my daughter's friend's entryway, trying to figure out how I could get out of the cul-de-sac. Not really any way to do that without being seen and get out of this altogether. How did I deal with that? Well, a lot of times when it's come to my social anxiety, when my public speaking anxiety, when I first started having to speak on a regular basis at my previous job, most of you know that I had recently retired from the CCBA, and that job involved quite a bit of speaking in front of people. Most of the time, what I found, because of the way that I am wired, was that the fear of embarrassment always overrode that fight or flight response where I wanted to flee and get the heck out of there, whatever the situation was. So there were many times when I was speaking that if you actually paid attention, you could see that my face was extremely red the whole time I was speaking. It would show up in pictures later. I did go to that bonfire after probably close to 45 minutes of pacing in circles and getting myself all sweaty and overheated. I did go, and you know what? It was fine. Everybody was great. It was a good time. Once I got a little comfortable, I was fine. So a lot of times for me, and this doesn't always work for everybody, a lot of times for me, the fear of embarrassing myself by not doing what I need to do or not doing what I've promised to do will override that fear of whatever I've got going on in my head that I think is going to be a problem. Now, because of this, over time, obviously here I am live on social media. I can often speak on the fly if given the microphone, if it's a topic I know something about. I've obviously overcome most of that social anxiety. But as I have said before, when it comes to anxiety and depression, it is daily practice. You always have to kind of be mindful that it may be creeping up on the edge. And over time, you may even find that you get to a point where you recognize it coming. But when it comes to those anxiety things, I often tend to muscle through because I know that on the other side is a better version of myself. And if you guys think that, again, I talked about anxiety dreams, having dreams before I get on these videos about weird things. So that's an example of how it's still there. But one of the most important things you can do in those situations is be brave. Bravery is not, courage is not the absence of fear. This is a popular quote. It is the ability to work through the fear and do it anyway. Okay, so that's a little bit of more talk about anxiety, and especially specific to social anxiety, which is, this is when you're going to see it this time of year. People that don't normally have a problem or that normally are able to muscle through, as more and more goes on, they get closer and closer. Christmas gatherings, it tends to pop up a little bit more. You tend to be more like, I don't want to go. I'm just going to stay here. Maybe I'll just tell them I don't feel good. And you know what? Maybe I don't feel so good. You see where that thought process goes. It's kind of a snowball effect. Medications. Medications are huge triggers for anxiety. Hormones, any kind of hormones, birth control, menopausal hormone treatments, hormone therapy, replacement therapy is what I'm trying to say. I'm having trouble with words this morning. Again, through personal experience, good morning, Beth, hormones, they can definitely trigger all kinds of levels of anxiety and depression. As your hormones fluctuate up or down, it changes, it just changes things. And that's hard to explain in a short video. But hormones can have a profound effect on your body. And if you can recognize that, I, for example, am hormone sensitive. always have been. So birth control for me sometimes meant taking my natural hormones and jacking them up just enough that it caused problems. In fact, one of the best days of my life was when I got off of birth control hormones permanently. And for me, I've been fortunate to have some things that help me deal with menopause. I begged for menopause. I would much rather be dealing with the results of menopause than the results of those birth control hormones. So hormones are a medication that can really kind of make things wonky. And if you feel like, if you know your body well enough to know that you're on hormone replacement therapy or you're on birth control and something has changed in the way you are responding to things since you've been on that particular medication or since you've changed medications, and you know that all of a sudden it seems like you are more anxious or you are feeling low, you're avoiding public situations or social gatherings more, maybe you're snapping a little bit more, then that's definitely, good morning, Danielle, that's definitely something you want to speak to a doctor about, because that means something needs to be adjusted. Cough and cold medicines are often, especially the non-drowsy ones, often contain ingredients that are essentially stimulants, for lack of a better way to put it, or they have a stimulant effect, especially if you're purchasing over the counter. One of the ones that has always worked for me, fantastic, contains ephedrine. I have learned over time that ephedrine definitely amps up my anxiety, along with all the physical manifestations of that, like dry mouth and all of that. So there are medications, especially in over-the-counter cold and cough medicines, that can contribute to your anxiety. Weight loss medications often have stimulants. Again, stimulants, that's what we keep going back to, often have stimulants that will amp up your anxiety. So if you are consuming stimulants, and that includes caffeine, that includes tremendous amounts of coffee. I don't drink as much coffee anymore, but I do like to have a little coffee on the weekends, maybe one day in the middle of the week, now that I don't go to an actual full-time job out of the house. Sometimes I have a little coffee with a little Irish cream. If I have too much of that coffee, I'm a jittery mess. It's because it's a stimulant, and that contributes to my anxiety. Sometimes if I find I'm having a higher anxiety day, I have to look back at what I've consumed and go, okay, this might be the problem. Skipping meals causes a drop in blood sugar frequently. That can amp up your anxiety, and it can also change how you respond to things. I talked about this last week. Negative self-talk, negative thinking. This is crucial in any wellness situation. If you would not, and we'll see if I can say this without, I've just run into so many people that I've heard do it lately that it's difficult not to become emotional. If you are speaking to yourself in a way that you would not speak to the closest person to you, you have to stop. If you are telling yourself, hey, let's just say, hey, Donna, you're not getting this done, you need to work on it. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about standing in front of the mirror and telling yourself how ugly you are, how fat you are, how stupid you are, any of those things. Those things perpetuate depression and anxiety. And at this time of year, as those things come up and we find ourselves being more self-conscious about everything, how we look, what we're eating. And again, this may sound like a repeat of last week, but these are all tied in together. For lack of a better example, what it looks like is you've got all this stuff going on in your head. You're supposed to go to a holiday gathering or family gathering, and you've got all this stuff going in your head about what you think is going to happen that's going to be bad at that family gathering. And then you start to get dressed for that family gathering or start to figure out what you want to wear, and everything you put on, you're looking in the mirror and you're tossing it away and you're, disgusting. I don't like this. This doesn't fit anymore. See, watch the path. And then you decide, I'm just not going. I'm just not going to go. And you communicate that you're not going to go. And then you sit home and you beat yourself up about why you didn't go and how your clothes looked on you. And you see how that road can go from a little bit of anxiety to a lot of anxiety, and then down to depression once you've responded to that anxiety. That's just a very, very simple layman example of how a lot of people, including myself, have experienced things like this, especially this time of year before. Obviously, there's personal triggers that can bring anxiety. If you're somebody that suffers from PTSD, there may be things that happen day to day, or especially during the holidays, that may trigger that. And then the final thing that I actually got, and I may have mentioned this last week too, that I got from a mentor of mine, was energy leaks. Energy leaks are a great source of anxiety, especially during the holidays when you're so busy. If there's a pile of laundry sitting over here that hasn't been done or hasn't been put away, if there's a pile of something else over here that hasn't been done or hasn't been put away, we're not going to look at that pile over there. Things that are hanging over your head that are not getting done. If you can take 20, 30 minutes, even 15 minutes once a day to poke away at those items, you will find that they will make you feel much better. If it's something that can absolutely wait, then it can absolutely wait. But if these are things that are constantly on your mind, that you're looking at several times a day or thinking about several times a day, you may do well and assist yourself dramatically by just taking. A lot of times there's things that I put off, and when I finally sit down and do them, it takes me 10 or 15 minutes. Or maybe I don't get it all done, but if I get it much more under control in that 15 or 20 minutes, it definitely makes me feel better. And that's what we call energy leaks. And those are things that you can work on to help ease your anxiety, especially during the holidays, but any time of the year. So those are the triggers of anxiety, some of the triggers, the most common triggers of anxiety. And of course, we're going to just talk real briefly about ways to fix them, some of which we already covered. Don't skip meals. Again, here we are back to diet and exercise. Do not skip meals because they can create low blood sugar situations where you become snappy, your anxiety increases, and maybe your reactions are not what they should be, which can cause all kinds of new problems. Make sure you're getting sleep. Sleep, again, like diet and exercise, the amount of sleep you're getting and the quality of the sleep you're getting has a tremendous effect on your personality, your psyche, and everything you do. In fact, I believe firmly, and I've believed since I studied psychology in college, that diet, exercise, and from personal experience too, that diet, exercise, and sleep quality or amount are probably three of the most crucial things. It is amazing how exercise and diet and sleep it can seem like it totally rewires you. I've given the example before that just going to a 1 hour line dancing class on a day that I was foul, or just going for a run on a day that I was completely foul, just changed my entire personality. I was an entirely different person by the time I was done. And there's a reason for that. So identify your triggers if you can, and try to avoid them if you can avoid them without giving into that fight or flight response, the flight side of it. Get some sleep, get your exercise, get out in the sun. Same thing. A lot of the suggestions for dealing with anxiety are the same as we talked about last week on depression. So let the sun shine in, get out there in the fresh air, outdoors, sunshine, go for a walk, 30-minute walk. If you're a runner, go for a run. If you want to be a runner, run for a minute and then walk the rest of the time. Whatever gets you moving. A good sweat session is always, always helpful. Healthy food. Last week I talked about Thanksgiving, and after 4 days of eating crap and drinking too much, I was a hot mess. And 1 day of decent food brought me back to center, and exercise, of course. Eat something healthy. You don't even have to focus on a whole day of healthy if you can't right now. At least try to eat one healthy meal with proteins and greens and colorful vegetables. Deep breathing exercises. This takes us back to meditation and yoga. Deep breathing is always recommended for anxiety, even if it just means you take 10 deep breaths before you open your mouth or respond to something or whatever it is that you're going to do. Journaling, again, same thing. I talked last week about the gratitude, having the gratitude box, having a gratitude journal. A lot of times focusing on what is now can take your mind off what you think is going to happen in the future. One of the suggestions also, if you're going to be having interactions with family members that kind of get you amped up, is one of the suggestions that I found is to rehearse things ahead of time in your head. But I have to be honest, I think it probably depends on the type of person you are, because for me, I tend to imagine what I think is going to happen or what I think somebody's going to say, and I rehearse in my head what my response is going to be. And for me, it tends to feed my anxiety a little bit more, because now I'm in this spin where I'm thinking about all of the things that could be said or all of the things that could happen and how I'm going to respond to them. And guess what I'm not doing? I'm not focusing on now. And I'm feeding that need to control what I think is going to happen in the future that may not even come to fruition. So I was actually surprised to see that suggestion about rehearsing things in your head, because I think that sometimes it can feed the problem. However, if you're about to speak about your feelings, or break up with somebody and you want to avoid conflict, sometimes rehearsing can help you get through the right responses so that it doesn't escalate into anything else. So I guess it just depends on the type of person you are and the situation. Get some exercise. See, a lot of this is the same as we talked about last week. Get some exercise, connect with loved ones, people that you trust. Do something creative. And again, clean something. Sometimes just cleaning one little thing that's, like I said, an energy leak can make a huge difference. Reach out to a loved one, somebody that you trust, somebody that enjoys talking to you, somebody that is positive, that makes you feel more positive just by being around them. And again, most importantly, if you find yourself to a point where in your anxiety that you are frozen, that you are not able to move in any direction, and now they talk about the flight or fight response as a fight, flight, or freeze, which I had actually never heard until a few years ago. But it is true. A lot of times the anxiety, everything can get running so much that you just freeze. You don't make any decisions. You don't do anything. You're just sitting there. And of course that can perpetuate the depression after you go through that and you've accomplished nothing. So if you find yourself to the point where you are in that freeze situation, or that your flee side, your flight side is going to cause you to do something that's just not smart, like running away, and adults run away too, not just kids, then it may be time to talk to somebody. If you find yourself so wrapped up in that anxiety and those racing thoughts that you are not able to accomplish anything, to even function during the day, then it is definitely time to talk to somebody, a general practitioner, your primary care physician, because in that case, even though I'm not a huge fan of medications, there are times where they are necessary just to kind of get you over that hump while you get things handled. So again, I cannot stress enough, just like last week when we were talking about depression, how important it is to recognize if you've reached a point where you need help. Talk to a loved one, talk to a trusted friend, talk to your primary care physician. If you're reaching a point where your anxiety is, if you're having full-blown panic attacks, if you're having heart palpitations, if you are having those types of symptoms of anxiety that are causing you to completely be non-functional or possibly causing you to think there may be physical harm that's being done because of the palpitations, because of the anxiety attacks, if you're in the emergency room getting checked out because you think you're having a heart attack and it's actually anxiety related, then it's definitely time to talk to somebody and to get help. So I hope you all found this helpful. Again, it may sound repetitive if you were with me last week, but unfortunately, the truth is that depression and anxiety are often two sides of the same coin. And often it's the same triggers that get us in either direction, and usually the same fixes. So I hope that you found this helpful. If you have, please feel free to share. If you have other content that you would like me to talk about, other wellness topics, then please feel free to message me. Since the last two have been such serious items, we might lighten it up a little bit for next week. Just talk about something that's not quite so introspective. But I'm always open to suggestions about things that I can add to the Wellness Wednesday. And I hope you have found this helpful today. Who knows, maybe even if you've heard it 8 billion times, maybe today's the day that it sticks. So thank you so much. And I will see you next Wednesday. Have a fabulous day. Bye-bye.